Hello and welcome to The Gist. I'm your host, Chris Vetrano, here every week breaking down all the things happening in pop culture. And today I have a very special guest to talk Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip in Thailand. He's a pop culture expert who shares his take on the most relevant pop culture moments in his weekly interview series, We Should Talk. He's also a Bravo aficionado with a ton of opinions, and I can't wait to hear all of them. He's also interviewed most of the network's biggest stars. Please welcome to The Gist, Gibson Johns.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be super fun. I know we're going to chat Ultimate Girls Trip, and for all of those folks out there that follow you on the socials, you share most of your opinions real time. So I'm hoping to get a little bit of that. But before we do, I'd love to just for the people, tell us how you came to love pop culture and then ultimately stumbled into this Bravo universe.
I've loved pop culture for as long as I can remember, honestly. When I was little, I'd watch Wizard of Oz almost every single day, literally when I was 4 years old. So if that was any clue for what was to come. My older brother and I have a lot of similar interests, and he sort of paved the way in terms of exposing me to a lot of pop culture growing up, I would say. Britney Spears was huge for me. That was
Same.
I think pop music was a really big way for me to get into things. And I think through that and caring about some of those pop stars, I started caring about their personal lives and then following the celebrity angle through that. But I always was, the TV was always on in my house,
Mm-hmm.
it was just one of those households, and I'm grateful for it now. And then, the TV was always on. So, and Bravo was on kind of starting around the first Queer Eye and Project Runway. And those really early those early Bravo shows that were part of that sort of reincarnation that probably around the time that Andy Cohen joined that network behind the scenes. But it was those early shows that showed sort of were a glimmer of what was to come. So because I was already watching those with my family, basically, when Housewives came along, it was only natural that we were going to start watching it. So I've been watching New York, Atlanta, Jersey, Beverly Hills. I watched DC because I'm from DC. I've been watching all of those since the first season. OC was I was not interested in that for a while. I didn't really tap into that until later years. I don't really know why, honestly. I just for some reason just didn't have the inclination. But
you've gone back since.
Yeah, of course. But
okay.
New York and Atlanta were the two that I really latched onto. And now that I think about it, I think a lot of that has to do with just how funny they were. And I just loved the humor that came from both of those. And I think it's kind of different humor, honestly, between those two. But Bethany and Nene, those early days, man, there was nobody funnier on TV, in my opinion.
Totally. I mean, they're icons for a reason, and they have had so much success. And I mean, OC was also so different in just the way that it was filmed, and it was still trying to find its footing. And, we have epic moments like the family van moment and things like that were early Vicky Gunvalson. But I think, it really was New York and then Atlanta. And then when Jersey came and Teresa flipped the table, I feel that's really when suddenly it was everyone was talking Housewives.
100%. And we watched Jersey from those early days too. And I wasn't necessarily my favorite franchise because it didn't, I think again, because I was a little younger, so it didn't make me laugh as much, but I remember the table flip. I remember Danielle Staub. I remember Cop Without a Badge. My mom loved the Manzos. It was just, we were quoting it from those early days. And that definitely I think brought it to fever pitch and kind of broke through that mainstream barrier, totally. which still happens these days, but less often. But I think it's exciting when that does happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned your love of Britney Spears and pop music and sort of following them and their careers and getting to know their personal lives. And, I'm guessing getting some of the magazines and reading the interviews and, even some of the cheesy, what's your favorite color and your favorite ice cream flavor and all of those things. And I feel now the world has shifted where we're not we don't look at Bop magazine anymore, but now we've got things like Twitter and Instagram and interviews like what you do that are bringing out some of that story behind these characters that, Bravo are kind of our pop stars today, which is so cool.
I think that's a good That's a good through line. And I think that like just naturally as humans, like we want that behind the scenes peek at things, or we want to know whether what we're watching or seeing is actually real. And I think at this point, we all know that like you can't take everything when it comes to celebrities at face value, because there's so much work that goes into getting to what was presented to us and sort of like what those thoughts are. And I love thinking about things on that level. And I think with reality shows like Real Housewives and what's on Bravo, I do think it's all real, even though like obviously the setups are produced and we all know that. If you're listening to this, you know that. But like, I still think there's like such a real element to it that makes it so like you can't plot it out. You can't really predict how somebody's going to react to a certain topic being brought up or what have you. So, you know, I think the reason why professionally I sort of gravitated towards Bravo and reality stars is because for a while I was interviewing just kind of like classic celebrities. Like I was interviewing really big names, but you know, I would get 12 minutes with them and they were promoting something, and you know, you have to ask what they're promoting, and then that leaves you with like maybe 7 minutes or 8 minutes. And then it's like, okay, in those 8 minutes, are they really going to tell you something? Are they really going to like let you in and what have you? And I think sometimes like occasionally, yes, it did happen. Like I could successfully disarm Nick Jonas and like he could like tell me something interesting, but like ultimately like the batting average is lower with them in terms of just like getting something with more to bite. And so I think when I started interviewing some Real Housewives, I was like, I realized, okay, their profession is sharing their life, and their profession is letting us in, and that's what keeps them employed. Like that is their job. And so I was like, in an interview setting, and one, I usually got more time with these people, and two, they'll tell you whatever the fuck you want to know. So like, and I loved that. Like, I was like, I don't want to like go into an interview and think, oh, I can't talk about this. Or like, I'm going to be scared to try to get to have this person talk about their relationship that we all know exists, but like, we have to pretend it doesn't. And this, like, that to me is like kind of getting back to that, like our celebrity artifice that like, I enjoy punching through that. And so with Real Housewives, you don't really have to do that. I mean, like, yeah, you have to like, they can spew their own level of like, you know, false reality and like what they want you to think, but like ultimately it's easier to get around that.
Totally.
And I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a ton of sense. I think, you know, even for me doing this and like some of the interviews and, you know, working with their publicists, and it's like, oh, you have this much time and I want you to hit these like 3 things that they're promoting. And it's like, yeah, well, how much did I actually get to know you, or how did we really pull like a really cool conversation? And whereas like for, like you said, the Real Housewives or any of these Bravo characters, they're doing this as part of their everyday life. And so it is interesting. I wonder what your take is, because obviously you do this. And so you bring a lot of like sort of breaking news through some of these interviews, or you get a lot of these behind the scenes stuff. What's your take on, is it too much at times? Because I've talked a lot on this podcast about some of the series where, you know, we know, for example, like OC is in the can and it's been sitting in the can. But like if something were to break tomorrow, like, I mean, the best example is kind of like the Jen Shaw of it all, is like, they couldn't go back like they did with Scandoval and reshoot very much of that, because it was like this whole season of her claiming innocence and then it completely changes. And I feel like some of that's happening too, even as some of these series are playing. I just saw recently, that Sam from Summer House, the new girl on Summer House this week, like just announced that like her and Corey are officially together, and we haven't even seen that play out on the show yet. And so it's like, at what point is it sort of ruining the viewer's perspective of what's happening? Or do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, it's funny because I also interviewed Sam this week, and it's coming out this week, and I literally 2 minutes before this was helping edit that. Yeah, no, but I think the most prime example of this sort of like, it's sort of hard to keep track of the timeline. I think the most pertinent example of that is when they introduced Winter House, which was an amazing idea, and I think it's been mostly successful for them, honestly. But it does complicate it, because it's like, okay, they film Summer House, and then they film Winter House, and then Summer House airs. and then they filmed the Summer House reunion, and then they filmed Summer House again, and then Winter House. It's really hard to keep track. And I think, I think they're doing a pretty good job of, like, all things considered, of revealing things when they should be revealed and what have you. But I also do love that, like, with Scandoval, with Drew Sidora and Ralph, like, racing to file for divorce, like, they are showing that they're willing to pick the cameras back up and, like, fold that new stuff, like, into, I'm guessing, the end of the season. It's definitely like this is a new frontier for them. If they're willing to do this, it complicates. I mean, it's sort of a slippery slope, I think. You know what I mean? Because then it's like, they have to have an off season for themselves. They have to have time to, like, recuperate and recover from. It's really grueling, one, to film, and then also to watch it back and then film the reunion. Like, I like when they have a little bit of more of a prolonged break between seasons. Like, I'm glad Beverly Hills did that this past season, because it was such a heavy situation. So I don't really know what the answer is in terms of, like, uncomplicating that, because I don't think that there necessarily is an answer. I think, like, I love the crossover Winter House. I love we're seeing an Ultimate Girls Trip too. It's like, and I think the Ultimate Girls Trip, I'm really liking this season, but, like, I don't know if they realized how over people were going to be about talking about the black guy, about talking about Heather and Whit. Like, we're 4 episodes in, and I was over having this conversation again. Yeah. 2 episodes in, but then this is all also filmed before the reunion was filmed and before BravoCon. So, like,
and so much has happened to a viewer. We've seen, the fights at Bravo Camp, and we've seen all of these things play out. So we kind of know what's to come. And I mean, for the black eye, for example, it's new for all of these ladies. Like, they didn't know it had happened because, they had just finished wrapping filming. I mean, literally walking in and Heather talking about, like, finding out about the guilty verdict and stuff, and, or the, I guess, guilty plea. And, that's just, like, that's news for everyone there. So you're seeing their reaction, and there is some stuff. Yeah. There's some interesting pieces to that, but I agree. It's like, I did a, like, poll of, like, whose side are you on in bad weather? And people are like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm over that storyline.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the one of the positives of that, actually, for me, is, like, one of my issues just across the board with Housewives are when, especially newer additions to these shows, they care way too much about what people think and being liked. And I do think that Heather can fall into that trap a lot of the time. And I think that her filming Girls Trip without realizing that, like, people were so over this, I'm kind of glad she didn't know that, even though it's kind of giving us more of that content. Like, I don't like when she lets the viewer opinion into how she acts in front of the camera too much, because then I feel like we've gotten a little bit further from, like, the authentic Heather that I think all initially fell in love with. Totally. And I think that she has to watch that and make sure that she kind of stays true to herself, because ultimately I do really like Heather, but I think that she's had a tough last year and a half on Bravo. And I want her to get back to that original kind of self.
Yeah. I was wondering how Ultimate Girls Trip was going to sort of either be redeeming for her, and then that first episode, I guess we can just transition right into it, is like, that first episode was just, I mean, she came out looking so bad, having, like, shared with Leah that she, like, wanted to, like, give her drink, or I guess with the other girls that they wanted to, like, pass her drinks. And, she was really taking it to, like, a very dark place. And again, it's like, it's not playing. And I wonder where that even comes from. They were talking, even Porsha was kind of like, oh, she's a fan. And that really started to look bad. Yeah. Yeah. I think that when Porsha said that, and, like, we all knew, I think Heather's also, like, utilized that, like, identity as being a fan of Housewives in, like, a really endearing way. Again, for her first probably year and a half, 2 years in the public eye on these shows. Yeah. But at a certain point, it, like, kind of becomes grating, and also kind of starts to shoot her in the foot. And I think that Porsha calling it out too, as, like, a seasoned housewife who's kind of, like, has no skin in the game at this point, honestly, because she's not even on a show. True. Like, for her to call that out it's tough. It was a tough look for Heather, I think. And it almost delegitimizes her in this setting where, like, there are such heavyweight housewives around her.
It doesn't make her look great.
No, I'm worried for her
Yeah.
for this next season. I mean, obviously she's filming, but it will be very interesting to see if this is her last, because if she can't kind of come back, I think that is the truth, is like, she's looking like a fan.
Yeah. And I wonder, it kind of gets back into that conversation we were having earlier about sort of the timeline of it all. Like, this is airing as Salt Lake is filming. So I wonder if any of this will play into what happened on Salt Lake. I'm assuming they're all watching it. Definitely Whitney and Heather are watching it. And like, again, I feel like Heather, it's pretty clear that she does pay attention to what the audience is saying. And so if she's like seeing how the other housewives are talking about her reaction to the Jen Shah of it all, in particular, to the Whitney of it all, is that going to help her change her tune for the better, or is it going to help her make her double down for the worse? Like, I don't know.
Well, and Lisa Barlow has come out on top of this last season. Everyone loves her, and she's had such an incredible fan reaction. It will be interesting to see if Heather, who has been so anti-Lisa for so long, if she sort of changes her tune on that as well, because she could. I mean, that would probably be her smartest bet at this point, is to, like, I think so too, squash that beef and like try to join back with the bad weather. Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I think back to that lunch that we got right after Jen Shah pled guilty, and it was Lisa and Heather, which is a really unlikely duo to be talking about it. Yeah, it was such an interesting duo to pick to do that, and like, I kind of like the dynamic, so I would be into that for sure. Yeah, I loved it. I was like, this doesn't feel like the final scene. I need, like, they're together. I want to like see more of this and see where this is going. I need this to be drawn out. Exactly. Yeah. So what's kind of your take on the cast of Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip? Like, do you feel, especially putting it up against the other two seasons, and we obviously know what's to come on 4, like, how do you feel about like the strength of this cast? I do. First, I'll say that I do really like that all 3 incarnations of Girls Trip have felt distinctly different. I think it just like proves the worth of this format, and just like, it really does depend on the personalities that they're throwing into the mix. I will say that this would be a much different season of Girls Trip if Tinsley had actually gone and Porsha had not replaced her last minute. I know. I can't imagine. I think Leah would be acting very differently. I think that she would have been received very differently. I think it would have been really interesting for Giselle, because I really love Giselle and Porsha together. I think it's like I like Chat Room. I didn't watch it all the time. I would like jump in and out of it, I would say, when it was on. But them in the actual Housewives setting is really, like, it's my favorite part of this season so far. I think they're really funny. I think it shows the funny side of Giselle that I think sometimes people look past, or we haven't seen as much in recent seasons, or what have you. But like, Giselle is funny as fuck, and Porsha is really funny. And so like, them together as genuine, really good friends has been really, I love watching that. But without Porsha there, like, what would it have been like with I don't think Candace and Giselle would have been as, I don't think it would have pushed them together. I think it honestly would have maybe made them even more adversarial with one another. And then I think maybe Candace and Tinsley I could see them having I could see that too. A lot in common. Totally. I think that could have been a dynamic, but I think to your point is like, it wouldn't have pushed Candace to Giselle. And I think then Giselle potentially ends up on her own, which I don't know if that would have been a good look for her either. Totally. Like, is she stirring the pot, like, just as a solo one woman show? And I also think that, like, I don't think that Leah would have repelled like the Miami women as quickly, because I think they would have liked Tinsley as well, because she has that sort of, high class, classy element to her that I think they kind of gravitate towards. So I think I think that like Leah would have felt more comfortable. I just think it would have really, really changed things. But as it stands, I think it's good. Like, I don't think they have like the best cast chemistry necessarily. Like, I think it's not like perfect. And it does feel right now that like, it's just like, they're all kind of anti Leah and Heather. Which, it happens, but I'm definitely enjoying it. And I think that like the mixture of the mixture of like old school, new school a little bit, especially with Alexia and Marisol, where like they consider themselves to be up there with like
the OGs, like the Luanns and the Teresas, they really consider themselves to be sort of in that pantheon. And it's not that they aren't, but like they had 10 years off. So it's just like a really different thing. And I love that sort of fourth wall breaking meta conversations that you can kind of read between the lines. And that's ultimately why I love Girls Trip, is because they really can talk about being on the platform. So I'm enjoying it. I don't think it's a perfect cast, but it's been fun to watch so far.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on the like Porsha. I like can't imagine. I put that in my notes. Like I was like, I can't imagine this without her. Like, first of all, she's like opening the whole series, kind of narrating us through all these women arrival, and then like, you know, some of her, like her with the triangle.
That's so good.
Yes, it was just like, we need those moments, especially because that's the one thing that I do feel about this cast, which I don't know if it, again, all of these cast members came directly from filming their seasons. And so I don't know if that's the reason, but they're all just like at each other. And I can't even almost keep up with all the feuds because there's so many. Like it seems like at any given moment, it's like it's Heather and Whitney, but then it's Heather and everybody. And then it's Giselle and the, you know, Miami women. And then it's Giselle and Candace. And then it's like, I can't even keep up with what's happening.
It's a lot. Yeah. But I agree. I think Porsha, they needed that star power, and that I think that she feels so comfortable in a scenario like this. And again, she like really doesn't have that much skin in the game. Like she is not actively employed by Bravo other than this one-off season. So like she brings levity to situations that I don't think would have been there without her. So I think what you're saying is like it almost would have been even more of that without her there.
Probably, because she does. I mean, she's definitely in the mix, and she's definitely been vocal and has her opinions. But I agree. I feel like she was she's playing the part that Phaedra did on the last one, which is like a comic relief. Like when things are getting really crazy, or someone says something that's like maybe too inappropriate, she can kind of come in and lay the like, you know, how did you know she was a lesbian because of her eyebrows? Like comment. Like she can say something that just like turns it around. I loved when she what did she say? She's called Whitney and Heather Graham and Whitney Houston.
Oh my God. No, that was moment of the season so far.
Yeah, I was like, okay, they're no longer bad weather. Like that's amazing. But yeah, it was it does feel, I agree with you that it feels so different from anything that they've done before. And I don't know if that's just the setting or if it's these women in general, because I don't think we've seen a lot of representation from these different cities. But yeah, I'm a little worried about like, how do we find some of the like levity? And one of the things I noticed that they're not doing this season is the like Housewives After Dark, which is where in the previous seasons, you would see some of the like fun stuff. Like they knew like cameras are kind of down and we can all kind of just like let loose and play Twister or do whatever it is that we're going to do. And then a lot of them would do the confessionals, and now it seems like a little more buttoned up. It seems like they're doing more of the confessionals like in post instead of like real time. So I wonder if that's like part of why
I wonder if they were almost like too tired to do those on the fly confessionals. But I agree, like I loved that, especially about season 2 and honestly season 1. And I think that like I agree with, I mean, season 1, like the drama never got really dark. There was drama, but it was like basically just Ramona, you know, and like some Cynthia stuff. But like season 2, there was a good amount of drama on season 2, but like you kind of knew they were going to wake up the next morning, like, and just kind of like forget about it and move on for the most part. And like, that's sort of how and that was a lot of older school housewives. And that's sort of, I think how they tend to operate. And I think that this is a reflection of like the scale is definitely, there are some older school kind of mentalities, I think, especially with like Porsha and Alexia and Marisol, but like the Salt Lake women, Leah, even and Candace and kind of Giselle, I think somewhere in the middle, have this sort of the more new school mentality where I think that a lot of the newer housewives can get bogged down with, you know, staying on this one thing, or like it can get darker quicker. And I don't think and that's harder to watch. And I think that there's definitely a lack of like, even when they're having fun on this trip, it doesn't feel as like pure fun. I don't know. There's like it's not as fun for us to watch almost, like, which is in a weird way. Like in the Berkshires when they would, I don't know, be in the hot air balloon. Like I was like laughing along with them, and like I'm doing that less this time, I would say.
Yeah. Or the like field day or whatever they did.
Exactly.
It was
exactly.
More, but there was also, I guess they did do that, like pickleball or whatever the volleyball-ish game in the suits. Yeah. I guess they are doing some of that, but it does feel a little bit more scripted in the fact that like we're going to have a dinner and then we're going to we're having a lunch, and whoever's hosting it is going to play some kind of game that's going to ultimately like bring out some drama, and then we're going to go to dinner, and then at dinner we're going to do the same thing.
Continue that, yeah.
So it's like, it doesn't, there's a little less of that, like just downtime in between where people are kind of reacting to what's going on. And so far my favorite parts have been that, like when Giselle and Porsha are like in their room together, sort of like chatting and being shady, and Porsha's ordering KFC from Pepsi, and which, I mean, Pepsi's kind of the standout. I mean, he's totally,
it's almost like they almost need more of him, I would say.
I thought he was in the trailer. I thought he was going to be kind of more of a staple in this season.
Right. And I think it's sort of, I'm in real time comparing this season to other ones, but like the other ones also had, I think, more housewives that weren't currently on shows, or like, I think the ratio is definitely more weighted towards that. And I think that they were more fresh. They were more like kind of game, just like jump in and bring it all and kind of bring their full selves. And I think that gets back to what you were saying of like, a lot of them in this season were coming directly off filming. They're flying all the way to Thailand. They're tired. They're weighed down they're exhausted by some of this drama they just had on their own seasons. And like, maybe that's also why Porsha is standing out so much, is because she hasn't been filming recently, and she's like, she's so down. Like, Ex-Wives Club was essentially like a tryout season for women to get back on their shows. Season 1 was OGs, and like some of them were still on their shows, Kenya and Kyle, but like, and Melissa, but like a lot of them, and Teresa, but like a lot of them were, I mean, the New York women, Cynthia had just sort of left her show, I think. And I don't know, there's something to be said. Maybe the formula for these shows is, and I think the next season is like this, it's more former housewives who want their moment in the sun. They're going to bring their full selves. They're really, they're not exhausted by the calendar of being a current housewife, which is, admittedly very exhausting.
Yeah. Well, and it's, we were talking about how all this crossover, and you were saying Salt Lake City's filming now, and obviously they're probably watching it. And we got, in one of the episodes, we got a cameo from Lisa Barlow.
Yeah.
And, she's saying things about Heather. And so it's like, there's another thing where like, this is now going to potentially bring this whole bad weather storyline into the next season of Salt Lake City. And like, we've already talked about, it's tired. And I think with some of that, like ex-wives style casting, we get a little bit beyond that, which is, I mean, it seems like that would be the smarter move to get better content. And what do you think about Porsha? Do you think that this is her sort of entry point back? Do you think that Bravo's going to find a home for her again? Or
I'm trying to read it, because I feel like on the show, she kind of implied that like she's really over it, and she doesn't really, I forget what the comment was, but I feel like she said something along those lines. But then she was on Watch What Happens Live, and she was like, basically never say never, like, and it sounded definitely more hopeful than I expected it to. I think it's one of those things where Porsha started her current relationship, which they both seem very happy in a really messy way. And I don't think she did not want to have to fully address that head on. She got her spin-off, but like that was sort of more on her own terms. She, when she left Atlanta, she also quit Dish Nation, which also would have been an avenue for her to kind of have to address it. And I think, if she was pretty smart, I think that Porsha was on this trajectory that is it was on this incredible upward trajectory that was sort of like years in the making. And I don't think she turned it around so well for herself, and that threatened that. I think that the thing with her new husband really threatened that, because people sort of were sketched out by how they kind of got together.
Yeah.
And I think at this point she's pretty much answered for it. So like I think she wanted to weather that storm out of away from the cameras and out of the public eye. And I think that now that she probably is getting a taste of like, oh, like I didn't ruin my reputation. Like people still love me. This show is making people fall back in love with me, or reminding them how much they did love me. Because I think the spinoff was also kind of like messy and like kind of dark. I didn't watch the whole thing. So I think that maybe it's telling her, maybe when they were filming the confessionals for this season, she was still kind of wary about it. But now that she's on Watch What Happens Live, they've aired 3 episodes, and it's like, oh no, people still freaking love Porsha Williams, Porsha Wilbadia, excuse me. Maybe she's like, oh, maybe there is an entry back for me, and I think she was kind of more nervous than she would ever admit about that. That's my read on the situation, and I would love for her to be back. I think she's one of the biggest stars they have at their disposal, honestly, just in general. So I'd love to see it. I can't fully read it, but that's sort of how I'm thinking about it right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, I did love, I felt the same. I was like, from episode 1, when I first saw her, I was like, oh, we need her back on our TVs. Like, and I agree. The spinoff was super dark. I did finish it, but only because like I have a problem where I can't stop something I start. But
I'm getting through that problem, but I have the same problem. Yep.
Yeah, it's like I'm like, oh, this is not worth watching, but I've got to just finish it.
Yep.
But I loved when she was like, oh, like, okay, Bravo, I see you trying to get me back, and the producer's like, for the last time, this is Peacock. Like, and she's like, huh? And it's just like she's the best, and she like knows how to deliver a line and knows like what people want to see. So I would love to see it. I think it'd be, I understand why Phaedra didn't land back on Atlanta. But I think that there is potentially a place for her on Atlanta. Which I'd love your thoughts on. We got the trailer of Atlanta. What are your thoughts on this upcoming season?
I think the trailer looks pretty great. I really do. Like I still think Atlanta's like kind of figuring it out in terms of getting back to like the true glory level of like what their glory days were for Atlanta. And I think they have it in them. But I watched that and I was like, okay, I'm excited. I'm laughing. There looks like there's some good drama. I liked that I didn't have a full read on what was going on. Like I couldn't fully tell like who was fighting with who at certain moments. And I like that. Like I don't like when they reveal too much or when we know too much going in. Like I like to be surprised.
Right.
And so I'm hopeful for it. I honestly am. The Drew stuff. I still don't think that she's ever fully been like fully authentic with us. And that gives me pause, but maybe I think it's almost going to be shades of like, it's obviously a very different situation, but it's almost going to be shades of the Jen Shah thing where like, it's going to, what we know ends up happening is going to make us question everything we've been shown from her up until this point. And it's going to force her hand. Like now we know that her relationship was as dark as we knew it was, but like she wouldn't really admit it. And, I think she wanted to paint this picture of her life, but like ultimately that you're not going to get away with that on a Housewives show. So, I'm curious for her and what we see from her and Ralph, up until the new footage comes out, but I'm hopeful. And I think that lastly, I'll say is like, I am a big Marlo fan. And I don't love how much she was being iced out at the end of last season. I think that's a really dangerous game to play when you're on an ensemble show like this. It creates for like a roadblock, and I understand why they were doing it, but it creates a roadblock. And then also just ultimately, usually what happens is like, it makes people be kind of circle back to be on that isolated person's side,
right?
Because it starts to make the people who are doing the isolating look bad. And so I hope that they, open that back up, but I don't know if they will.
Yeah, because I think they need her. I think that they
do.
She is kind of the Nene Porsha comic relief that show needs. Sheree's given us some great stuff, but Sheree's also like at times inauthentic, or wasn't always like clear what she was doing with that guy. And then, obviously She by Sheree has just been a big old mess. And so it's like we don't really know what we can like take from her as face value, and so and I agree with the Drew stuff, because I think the Jen Shah is probably very accurate, where we're gonna like see things where we knew that Jen ultimately changed her plea, but she's saying one thing. And so I feel like we'll get a lot of like her trying to come to defense of her husband at the time. And then it's going to all come kind of crashing down in the final episode or whatever.
Yeah, we know these new Atlanta editors from last season. Like they are not afraid of a flash forward, flash back, graphic, what have you. Like they're going to interject in like all these moments. I'm sure. Well, I'm sure they're re-editing.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, because I do feel like, and I want to get your thoughts on the Scandoval of it all, of course, but I do feel like it's really strange how Vanderpump is like turning out, because I felt like, okay, I just want to get to that. Like now we know this like huge thing, and we're being fed this like Tom Schwartz, Raquel storyline. And I was like, I don't think it's going to be enjoyable to watch. But then there's been like so many red flags, or there's been so many things in it that it's like, well, it is actually kind of interesting to like watch this now and see all of these things that it seems so obvious in our face. And it's not like something that we could like comprehend, and the editors even didn't know at that time. And, you know, Andy has said they have not recut these episodes, and that's just wild to me.
Yeah, it's I've said this before, but it's creating for a truly new viewing experience where, you know, with Jen Shaw, like we knew that she ended up pleading guilty, but you can't really pick up on like signs of her guilt, like in scenes with Heather Gay or like scenes with Barlow. Like
right.
with Vanderpump Rules, like we can be the ones that are reading between the lines and picking up on body language and picking up on throwaway comments now that, again, we're not edited in, but it's creating for this, like, there's kind of like this dual way of viewing it where you can view it as they were going to present it without Scandoval, like pre-Scandoval, and then you can view it with the post-Scandoval mindset in mind. And Brian Moylan does a really good job of outlining this in his Vulture recaps, but like it really is kind of like you have to think about it on two different levels, and it's I think it's really fun. It's really fun. Yeah. And like I agree that I was curious how the rest of the season was going to feel, but it's working for me. And like I was already loving this season of Vanderpump Rules. Like it really did feel like a return to form, and now it's like, you know, a new level of form that they're giving us. And so I'm really liking that kind of double read that we're having to do.
Yeah, I was in that stage where I was like, oh, I could give up Vanderpump and be fine. But of course I can't stop what I started. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll watch one more. And then I was so glad that I did, because, you know, it reminded me, I think I said this on the podcast when it first started, is it reminded me of, I watched Beverly Hills 90210 growing up, and then kids like were high school students, and then they went to college, and it kind of changed. And then all of a sudden there was like this, they graduated college, and it was like, well, now what is the show going to become? And then like the next season came back, and it was like sexier, and it was like these adult storylines, and they like weren't trying to be young kids anymore. And because I think they knew at that time, like that wasn't going to play well for the show. And they just sort of leaned into making it more of a Melrose Place. And I feel like that's what Vanderpump finally did, is they leaned on the fact that, okay, these kids are not kids anymore. These are like grown adults that are dealing with like divorce and like really adult things. And then, you know, obviously no one knew what was going to happen with the Scandoval stuff, but it's just like, it feels really, really authentic again. And it feels like a new show almost this season in a way that like revitalized the whole thing.
Yeah. It really is. They're dealing with like Housewives level issues of business problems and divorce and, you know, I guess like some custody stuff. Like there's certain things that are coming into this, and like home ownership. But they've kind of given up the false what like setup of like still working in the restaurant for the most part. Like they still kind of push Raquel to do that, which whatever. And like Lisa Vanderpump for some reason still gets like first seat at the reunions, which like I don't understand that really. No. But I don't dislike having her around, because I still think she's kind of like a great mentor figure for some of them at certain points. But it's been really great. But I also think that what's really smart of them is like they still haven't they haven't tried to make it full Housewives where it's like high class and like these people have money now. Like, no, like they still are really youthful people who party a lot, and they're really messy, and they like haven't fully made their homes nice, and like they have the money but they don't know how to use it yet, you know. And so it's I'm glad that we still have that, because ultimately, they should feel, I think part of the appeal of Vanderpump is also that they feel like they could be like our friends, like they aren't, it's not an unattainable level of lifestyle that they're living. And I think that makes what they're going through like more relatable and really does like help us latch onto them in a different way than we do with a housewife. So I'm glad they haven't lost that element as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if they're going to make it Housewives, it's like, then it would just be another Housewives. And this feels like still like a different show, and that I'm watching a different like ensemble cast to do something different. But so what was so there was rumors, and I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but the reunion is apparently going to be there's going to be like longer extended episodes that are going to be exclusive to Peacock. Do you know, is that
well, I saw that Andy said that on his radio show.
He did.
He said that he believes that Peacock will have extended versions of the episodes, and that he had done one-on-one sit downs with Raquel, Tom, and Ariana. Which to me, like, that feels like where the extra footage should probably come in. Because I would love to see those one-on-one sit downs completely unedited, just like presented to us. I would watch 8 hours of that. So yeah, I think he did say he thought that was what's going to happen. Okay.
I wasn't sure if that was just like hearsay or and I didn't know what the extended part was, because I'm like, I hope that we're not going to get, a 3-part reunion where part 3 is when we start talking about Scandoval.
I know,
because I can't talk about Sheena's wedding for an entire hour.
Well, I was listening to which podcast? I think it was Lala on Sheena's podcast. I'm getting confused. I'm trying to listen to like as much of that like extra content as possible. But I'm pretty sure last week on Sheena's podcast, Lala basically said like, I don't prepare for a reunion, but I did say to the producers that like I really wanted us to still, or I guess the producers called actually all the cast members before the night before they filmed, and they were like, "Do you guys want to like still go deep on the existing storylines that were still part of the regular season, yada yada yada?" And they all said yes, because they all still like, some of that is still relevant. Some of it, I mean, they all still deserve their moment, like their video package and what have you. And Lala said that like, even though they all wanted to do that, it just kind of like, it didn't really work. Like they all just kind of like wanted to talk about Scandoval once they got there.
I heard it like got heated within minutes of everyone sitting down,
which I totally believe.
Well, I mean, this is like a very feisty cast of characters. And so I can't imagine like having these people sitting across from you. And I did notice when they released all the reunion looks, Raquel's the only one that never posed for a photo.
I did notice that. I wondered what the explanation was there.
Yeah, I feel like she must have just, I mean, I have to imagine that also, this is the girl who said that the only reason that she took the Tom Schwartz photo is because she like wanted the media to use some sort of like different photo that was out there. And then all these paparazzi shots that I think she's setting up herself are horrible of her. We're getting like the worst photos of her. And so it is strange that she like wouldn't pose for this, but it seems like maybe something happened where she was probably not on set.
Yeah, I'm guessing they started with the Sheena stuff. Or Sheena had the stool first, and they probably did the photos before, once the glam was still fresh.
That makes sense.
And so maybe they just forgot to do it with Raquel when she joined set. I don't know, but
because things got so crazy. Yeah,
karma's a bitch.
I'm so disappointed that we couldn't get Sheena and Raquel face to face.
I know. I mean, that whole situation is just like, so again, we can see right through it. And it's just, Raquel has changed her tune so much in terms of like the narrative that she's trying to push. And like, I don't know. I mean, like she's out here like hanging out with Sandoval at their house. Yeah. Meanwhile, her initial statement, which like on the day, even though it became late on the day she released it, I was like, you know what? It's like all things considered like a pretty decent statement where she was like, I want to work on myself. Blah, 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 blah. Well, that didn't really last long, did it? No. Yeah. So,
well, and it seems like after the reunion, that's sort of when they sort of gave up any kind of facade. It just seems like whatever happens at the reunion, they were like, okay, this is just like where things are going to go now. And now everyone's kind of like free to talk about whatever.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, I keep on looping back to our first conversation about the timelines and stuff. And like, I think I thought I was going to feel the way we said, which is like, I'm ready for this reunion, like cut through all the, no, but like, I'm good to see how it all leads up. Cause I actually want to know all the different kind of steps along the way. I'm so excited to see the new footage that they are tacking on to the end of the season before the reunion. Like, I want to go through all those steps before we get to the reunion. And I'm kind of surprised I feel that way, or maybe I'm just pleasantly surprised about how they're, again, they haven't re-edited, but the way it's being presented to us is really well done, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, you're really watching it in a completely different way, and I have a little bit of Scandoval PTSD because I talked about it on my previous recap episode of last week's Bravo shows, and I said that there was like a scene in Summer House where Paige says to Kyle, "Oh wow, this is the second week in a row that I'm sexually attracted to Kyle," and I was like, "Oh god," it sent a chill down my spine because I was like, "Oh god, what if this is the next Scandoval?"
No, don't even speak into existence.
I know.
Oh my god.
I was like, I had to like put it out there, and then I like felt like I needed to apologize for even putting it in the world. But yeah, it was pretty wild to see that like scene, and then I started like watching Summer House with that same sort of lens, and I was like, I have to not be thinking that everyone is doing this shit behind the scenes. Cause
I know. There was a Dumois thing about Kyle, I think, and like I don't really put much weight on a random Dumois thing, and they dispelled that stuff on Watch Happens Live. But I actually think that people are still reading Summer House in that way this season, regardless of what they've said. I'm not, because I don't believe it, but there's definitely, you're right. There's definitely, I think it's whet people's appetites for more of this kind of subtext, you know?
Yeah. Well, and then we got the like Southern Charm news about like Austin, and it's like, so now everybody's trying to, they're just trying to bring it out. I am curious because, you know, we talked about Vanderpump and how it like kind of had a refresh, and they've kind of left behind this facade that they're servers and that there's these young kids. I feel like Summer House is in the same sort of space, that it needs a little bit of and I don't know if it's a refresh, but I feel like maybe I just need more scenes of them like living their actual lives, like being adults, because I mean, we're about to celebrate Kyle's 40th birthday, and it's like, I'm not believing that he's the same guy that Stassi, you know, that offended Stassi in the hot tub in the first season.
Steve Jobs, exactly. Yeah. I agree. It's definitely, it feels like a transitional season for Summer House. I'm actually not as, I do feel that about Kyle, but I don't feel it as much because of his age, because I still think he acts like he's 32. You know, I don't think he acts like he's 40, at least when they're filming. I think outside of summer, he actually doesn't really party that much anymore. But you really feel it the most to me with Carl and Lindsay. And it's hard because at this point we're 7 seasons in, and we're so, at least I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I feel like people are really attached at this point to, it was a slower burn, but we're attached to Carl, we're attached to Lindsay, we're attached to Kyle and Amanda. And like, there's no roadmap for how you transition somebody out of Summer House, and like, what do you transition to them not being on TV? Can they create another show that creates this sort of kind of catch-all for people that can graduate from Summer House and maybe graduate from Southern Charm too, because there's so much inner dating. Like, maybe there is that show where it just takes place in the city in the off season, not in the summer. We follow their lives as they kind of level up, like Vanderpump has, bring in some more of their other friends to have some more like authentic adult drama. I think that there's a show there, because I think that they've put so much work into making Summer House what it is, which is like a show that people are actually watching. And a lot of that is because of the personalities that are on this show. And I think to just throw that away at the peak of the show, I can imagine them doing that. But I also don't, again, like that next stage doesn't exist yet. But I do think that like, I would 100% watch a show like that. So,
well, and I've seen like a lot of people online like have said, graduate Lindsay to, RHONY now that like they've rebooted their cast, and people have like, I saw something about how Lindsay is older today than Bethany was when Bethany Got Married aired.
Right.
And it's like, so Bethany could be a housewife. Like, why can't Lindsay? And then like make Carl the house husband. And I'm like, I don't know. Cause then I feel like we're getting into a weird territory where like there's too much crossover.
No, but point. I also think that like what we were saying earlier with Vanderpump, it's like these people aren't, it could work, but like I also think that these people like aren't necessarily housewives material just in terms of like their lifestyles. Like they live like a more youthful life, and they partying is still sort of an element. I know that Lindsay and Carl obviously less so these days, but like that's still an element. I don't know. To me, it's just like make the Vanderpump of the East Coast, the Vanderpump 2.0 of the East Coast. Just make that. You can keep Summer House, make it like all 20 somethings, and like there can be 2 shows here.
Yeah, it'll be like when Whitney left the hills and created the city. Like
exactly,
move everyone to the city.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I definitely, love all of your takes. Before we wrap, like, is there any other sort of like things that you're really looking forward to that's coming on Bravo? Like one that you're in either a new show or maybe some of the storylines that we have to come.
I'm really excited.
I know you're not a big New Jersey fan, so I'm trying to like steer away from the Teresa of it all.
Right. I don't. Yeah. I'm really curious to see what they're going to do about Jersey. I was just talking to somebody who works at Bravo, and I was just like, what are you guys going to do? And he was like, I don't know. I am really excited about Summer House Martha's Vineyard. I think that trailer was really promising. It's a 3-minute trailer for a first season of a show like that is really rare to me. I think the Southern Hospitality trailer was like 1.5 minutes. So, and I loved that show. I hope that show gets a second season.
Same. Because that's the new Vanderpump. That's
and they have such an effortless, authentic messiness to them that like
totally
is real. It just I hope they lean into that show because I think it's really promising. I'm interested in what Beverly Hills has in store for us. I think they're bringing in a lot of old people to that show, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad sign. I think it tends to be like not a great sign for what's happening on the season, but I'm hopeful. I'm happy Rena's not on the show anymore. And
good. Okay. We won't fight that one out.
No, we won't fight that one out. I'm firmly on that side of things.
Good.
I don't know. I think we're in a pretty good. I'm enjoying being a Bravo fan right now. I think that like the pandemic had a little bit of a dark turn there, and I think we're on the other side of that. So I'm very enthused by what we're having right now. Yeah.
I am looking forward to OC. I think I'm interested in seeing Tamra back, and I didn't necessarily need Vicky back, but I think that like we potentially are in for something cool there. And then, I agree with you on, I don't know what's going to happen to Jersey, but I'm done with Teresa and Joe's storyline, and I'm ready to like introduce these new ladies. So I'm curious to see how that kind of wraps. I know that they were all like, I think, issued a gag order, so they had to like stop talking about things.
Real? I didn't see that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they're not allowed to talk about the season on their podcasts and stuff because they're like, I think they want to save some of the storyline.
Yeah, that's smart.
But that's awesome. Tell folks where they can catch you. I know you've got your weekly series, so where can they find that? And then also just follow you your socials. Yeah, so my series is called We Should Talk. You can watch it or listen to it. You can listen to it wherever you get podcasts, 1 or 2 episodes a week. Each episode is just one interview with a reality star, some sort of celebrity. And then you can watch it on YouTube or on Yahoo, or I always link to it whenever a new episode comes out on my socials, which are Gibsonoma, Gibsonoma, across all the platforms. And then I also have a newsletter of the same name where I just send stuff out once a week, which is really fun. So thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. Yeah, thank you for doing it. Like I said, you have lots of opinions, and sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't. Listen, but I think healthy disagreement is good, as long as like you can be level with expressing that. I'm all for disagreeing, but like some of these online spaces that we occupy just don't allow for that, or don't really whatever. But I love
healthy disagreement on the Housewives. That's what I do with my friends every day. So
yeah. Well, I was definitely Team Gibson in one sort of online thing that I saw. I also don't think Chris is bringing much to Summer House, and
I appreciate you saying that.
I don't think that it has anything to do with like anything other than that he is just kind of boring and he's not like maybe great TV. But
yeah, I think not everyone's made to be a reality star, and that's okay, and it has nothing to do with anything else. Yeah. And it's I'll just say that I've not seen anything that has like conflicted with that assessment of what's going on there. So
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yes. So I will be continuing to support.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for stopping by. For you all out there, thank you for listening. You can follow me at CM Vetrano on all the socials. And of course, rate and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of The Gist. Gibson, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have you back again and talk more Bravo, because I feel like I could do it all day, every day.
Yeah, I'll come back whenever you need me. This is so much fun.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to hold you to that. And again, to all of you out there, thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have an incredible weekend. Until next week, bye.